Hi, good morning, and welcome to the ZP vlog and podcast. So every Sunday at 8 a.m. London time, we like to do a webinar for the news for ZP for this week. So this is the week ending the 16th of January 2022, and we basically just go through kind of news and items that ZP has put out there this week. So the first one thing I want to touch upon is we haven't spoken about it in quite a long time, but ZP does sell a chili sensor. I just want to say hi to Aftab. Aftab is one of our longest members of ZP Developer Zone. So I just want to say hi to him because he's online this morning. So the first thing I want to say is about the electronic chili. So the electronic chili is super useful for companies who are producing chili-based products, chili sauces, for example, and we have a little electronic chili that actually allows people to sort of validate that the electronics are actually working correctly. It's essentially a sort of, this is the boring part. It's basically a PCB with some standard components on it, and by using that, then you can get a standard result out of the chili sensor. And just as a sort of note, we're going to have we're sending a chili sensing system to India. So people who are interested in the chili sensor in India can contact Technando, and there they can either send their samples for paid testing, and the Technando team could potentially do it, or so they can have a rental discussion with Technando as well. So this video here just talks about, or the video that we put on the website just talks about how commercial companies can validate the technology, because you have to do that sometimes as part of your quality assurance, that you have to periodically test your equipment, making sure it's still accurate. I also want to just say hi to Saran, who's joined us this morning. Nice to see you, Saran. And then just finally, we're going to be sending one of these systems to India, to our partner Technando. And so if you're interested in this system in India, then please reach out to them there. Some other news from ZP for this week. This is just a bit of fun, but I think it really makes the point. At ZP, we are by far the most active biosensor developers in the world. It's not just lip service. This was a picture that was taken by one of our. If you can see the vlog, we took a picture of a bottle of testosterone. It's chemical grade testosterone that had come into the business. And why had we been ordering testosterone? Because we'd be making a testosterone sensor. And I think it's significant to say, because it's not easy to necessarily get hold of some of these chemicals. You have to be quite a serious company, do serious work in order to get testosterone. As you can appreciate, I wouldn't say testosterone is a banned substance, but it can be abused. And so, we're basically be making a sensor for testosterone, and as part of that, then we were actually had the material in-house as well. So thanks to the guys for sorting that out. It wasn't easy to get hold of testosterone. So there's a couple of nice contrasts there. We have, the first thing I talked about was electronic chilies, so that we could validate our chili sensor. And then in the second breath, we're talking about testosterone sensors. And I think that's what makes ZP really unique, is that actually we do have that broadness of experience, that, it's not just chili sensors. We also do testosterone sensors. And chili sensors you can do using techniques like voltammetry, and testosterone sensors, you have to have some sort of recognition system in place. Now, I think this next video, if you can see it on the vlog or in picture, it really shows some of our screen printed electrodes, but what we've done is we functionalized them with little, I'd say, wells, so that people can use them in a sort of sensing application. Often when you see a screen printed electrode, it will, there's no target area. You either dip the sensor into a beaker, or you kind of pipette a solution on top of the sensor. But, we are, in order to make it more like a biosensor, we've put a little sort of retaining well around the electrode, so you can put a drop on there and it's held in place. Now, the reason we're doing this is because these are biosensor products that are actually going out the door. In this case, these are TAS sensors, total antioxidative status. So I think there's the third type of sensor that we're, involved with just in this kind of, just this week, let's say. So good job in screen printing electrodes, good job in functionalizing electrodes, and good job in putting the microfluidics on top of it. So I was happy to see that this week. We did have a webinar on Thursday, and I really felt that it was because the webinar, we were basically addressing so many questions. One of the questions that came through on the webinar this week for the ZP Developer Zone members was, what electrodes should I use for redox reactions? And we said carbon and platinum. And we linked to our value platinum sensors and our hyper value carbon sensors. Then somebody said, I'm working on glassy carbon electrodes, and my screen printed electrodes now are sort of working, but I'm not getting, it's not exactly the same. And we said, no, it's not exactly the same. It's good to work out your assay on a glassy carbon electrode, and then when you go to a graphite electrode, it's okay if the data's not one for one, as long as you can, as long as the graphite screen printed electrodes are working, then you're sort of good to go. Then we had some questions about heavy metal detection. Heavy metal detection you can do using a technique called anodic stripping voltammetry. You essentially, in anodic stripping voltammetry, use a negative voltage to plate the metal onto the surface, and then you do a linear sweep into a direction of a positive voltage, and the molecules, also not the molecules, the metals reoxidize, and their peak and the area under the curve is the peak position is indicative of the metal, and the area under the curve is indicative of how much is there. Then we had a nice inquiry about HPLC, high pressure liquid chromatography. In fact, at Zimmer Peacock we do have an HPLC system, and you can use electrochemistry as a detector for it. In HPLC they often use UV vis detectors. They sometimes use mass spec, but there's also a branch of HPLC called ECD, electrochemical detection, and somebody wanted to make some new sensors for that, and I suggested some of our gold electrodes. Somebody else wanted to know how to get started on in-body, on-body measurements, and we suggested a set of low-cost electronics for them based on our GFET, and we also suggested some pH sensors to get them going. Somebody else wanted to do vapor phase chloride measurements. Talked about when you're doing vapor phase work, you often have to condense the vapor phase to the liquid phase so that you can actually sense it. So I talked about that. And then finally I had an inquiry about electronics for ketone sensors. And so we did, there we told them, this is the electronics from Zimmer Peacock. You can use electronics from Texas Instruments, and here's some low cost or cheap potentiostats that you can build, open source potentiostats. So we did give a pretty comprehensive answers there this week. I think I'm really pleased with this. I think this is one of the pieces that makes Zimmer Peacock quite unique, that actually, as well as the hyper value electrodes that we sell, we're making a whole series of accessories to go alongside those hyper value electrodes. So the guys have made little 3D printed parts. You can sort of download, as long as you're a client of Zimmer Peacock and you're using our hyper value electrodes, you can have these little sort of plastic pieces. You can clip on the little wells. I know Saran's online this morning. Saran's one of our engineers, so he definitely knows our, we've got a lot of 3D printers in house, but we can make these files available to our clients so that they can take advantage of these accessories as well. So as long as you're a hyper value client, then we can make these 3D printed parts available to you, and it should really help with the sort of R&D and the development work. So I'll just back up one now, and we did put out a pretty detailed review this week of wearable biosensors. So we kept it sort of I would almost say sort of journalistic, in terms that made sure that made sure that there was good content. So we put out a whole review around wearable electrochemical biosensors, and so that's on the website as well. And really talked about, for me, there is definitely a future, or one of the directions of garments is, we really will want to put biosensors into these garments, do things like sodium in the sweat, pH in the sweat, chloride maybe in the sweat. That is one of the futures of that is definitely one of the futures of electrochemical biosensing. And I do want to emphasize it, and I know I just made the note, but for me, I feel like the accessories for screen printed electrodes that I just really commented upon, that is really important, because what makes Zimmer and Peacock different is the support that we give these screen printed electrodes. We do webinars every week helping people understand our screen printed electrodes, we also then give these 3D printed files to people as well. Just want to hopefully hopefully the Wi-Fi is going okay. So let me just back up one now. I think we're getting near the end. We also did some work this week we do a lot of electrochemical transdermal sensors in CGM, continuous glucose monitoring. So I would say that Zimmer and Peacock is by far the world leading contract developer and contract manufacturer of CGM, continuous glucose monitoring. It's probably worth saying that many companies come to us and say, oh, I just want to buy your CGM, but it's not that simple. They have to engage in us in some meaningful way, in order for us to really help them on CGM. But the reason I bring up CGM is because if you look at our website this week, you'll see that we've actually put some data out there where we've been measuring glucose sensors that have been pierced into some artificial skin, and we've been continually monitoring them over something like 5 days in that skin environment, where we've been changing the glucose and seeing how the sensor responds. So we're quite happy with those. I am getting near the end now, so this is an interesting one. What we're doing is at Zimmer and Peacock, as part of our CGM, our continuous glucose monitoring, we've been making a CGM system for monitoring fish. Now, these sensors are actually implanted into the fish. Now, the very interesting thing about doing that is transmitting data through seawater is not that straightforward. It really impedes data transmission seawater. If you try to do it if you try to use electronic data transmission, sort of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, this stuff does not go through these highly conductive solutions. So we've been working on that this week, as how to get data transmission actually through seawater. We've actually come up with some pretty creative solutions around that. So what I will do now is I'm going to essentially sort of summarize that the first three topics that we talked about this week were really all about sensing. I mentioned the chili sensor, the caffeine, the testosterone sensor, and then I mentioned that we'd actually been working on some TAS sensors, total antioxidative status sensors, and we had a very good webinar this week. Lots of questions and lots of positive response. These 3D printed accessories for the hypervalue electrodes, these should really help people in their adoption of hypervalue electrodes. When you buy the hypervalue electrodes, you're not just buying, and it is actually a high quality, low cost item, because we're actually making quite high volume. You're buying the webinar support, and you're also buying the little accessories that we also do for it. There's a good review on wearable electrochemical biosensors. We've been carrying on in the biosensor and wearables theme. We've been making artificial skin to do transdermal sensors, which is really useful for the CGM space. And then just to kind of emphasize how much CGM work we do, our fish tag project, there we've got the continuous glucose monitor in place, the cortisol monitor in place, the electronics in place, and then we're transmitting the data through seawater, which is, you know, much more, let's say, challenging. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to thank Saran. It's good to see you, and we'll have a nice busy week, I'm sure. And I also want to say thank you to Aftab for also attending, and this will be on YouTube later on as a vlog, and we'll also put it out as a podcast as well.